Okay, shalom everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. I just wanted to get a little bit more study on the MtDNA or Autosomal DNA for the Europeans. So I can go ahead and do this. Now, as we can see, this is a population of a particular ethnic group. I think it's the Gypsies. And the blue color is the amount of Asian MtDNA that there is. And so you notice the M is the Asian. So all the N's, which these would be all N's, are European/Middle Eastern. So in this ethnic group in Europe, there is only less than a quarter, sometimes more than a quarter, of Asian MtDNA. So what this means is that there's I guess imbalance is not the word, but imbalance of paternal DNA versus maternal DNA, which means the autosomal DNA is majority Middle Eastern in Europe, which I knew all along, but because we're not typically Asian looking in Europe. So everybody in Europe, whether Russian or Scandinavian or whatever, if you don't look Asian, what some people do look Asian, then you probably have the majority Middle Eastern mitochondrial DNA, which means you have the majority autosomal Middle Eastern DNA. Okay. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to look specifically at the MtDNA of the various peoples. For example, here we have HHV, JK, NT, and U. Notice the M. M is the Asian DNA. Notice the L. What's the L? We know that's the Hamitic mitochondrial DNA. So in Romanian Jews, they have 2% Asian mitochondrial DNA and 2% Hamitic DNA, which they took with them from the Middle East, probably from the Canaanites or Egyptians or whatever was joined to their population. Now, when we look at this, we have to make a difference between individuals and the group. So the group, in the group, some of them have Asian mitochondrial DNA. in the group, some of them have Hamitic mitochondrial DNA. Most of them in the group, the majority, vast majority, have Semitic mitochondrial DNA, which is the ends. So in mitochondrial DNA, it's L, M, and N, if you're confused about this still. And then there's letters under M, and there's letters under N. And these letters here, the H, the HV, J, K, T, and U, and W, and such, are letters under N, or the W, I'm not sure, but the X is under N. Okay. Because I had a response video to Dapper Dino. I appreciate his response because sometimes it's like I'm talking into the air or talking to myself. So when somebody responds, it's appreciated. Notice again, these are Portuguese Jews, the host population, Belmonte Jews, and Bragança Jews. Notice the amount of the L mitochondrial DNA and the M. It's about the same percentage or less. It's actually less in the host population. So, for example, you could expect to have the male paternal line in Portugal or in Europe from Ham. So you can expect to have the E's maybe in E2, E1, or sometimes a B, which is Hamitic. But look at the percentage. Well, this is the mitochondrial. They will have obviously a greater percentage of the paternal Y chromosome than the maternal haplogroups. But look at the percentage of the haplogroups of the maternal DNA. It's hardly even a sliver of M's. This is Asian. See this orange color? It's barely a sliver of Asian mitochondrial DNA. Remember, the M's are Asian or Japhethic, were known as in ancient history known as blackheads. And in the Bragança Jews, I don't even see a trace of it. Belmonte Jews, not even a trace of the Asian DNA. Now there is a trace of the Hamitic mitochondrial DNA, as you can see here. This white color before the orange is a trace of the Hamitic DNA, which is a good chunk, maybe 5 or so percent, 7% or something. Then you have the ends beginning with on this other side of the orange, which the ends are all these haplogroups fall under N, which is Semitic. So all the rest of the mitochondrial DNA and most of the autosomal DNA is from the Semitic mitochondrial DNA maternal line. So that's from here, this N, all the way through here. So a clear majority of the general population in Portugal. Okay. Now here we have again almost 100% mitochondrial DNA. And even it doesn't matter if it's ancient DNA or the more modern DNA. It's really basically the same. It's all almost all 100%. These are all Semitic mitochondrial DNA in Europe. So I wanted to look at specific regions because this is as good as 100%. This is not determined. Okay, this is an area of not determined in the modern. Probably includes Asian mitochondrial DNA. So what I wanted to do was to focus to see if I could focus on different populations in Europe as to their percentage of mitochondrial DNA. You know, get an idea of what it is. This is the in Italy. The black slivers on the pie charts is the percentage of the Hamitic haplogroup mitochondrial DNA. So let me see. This is E1B1. Actually, it's not mitochondrial. This is Y chromosome. But anyway, they have these designations, these letters under the E1B1. So that would be the percentage of the, might say, the invasion or the you know, whether by invasion or whether by just moving into Europe. This is the percentage of the Hamitic Y chromosome, the E1B1. Then you have all these designations here. Then the percentage of the J2 and the percentage of the R1B1. Okay, this is under discussion as to whether or not they came marauding or they came just moved in. But what I wanted to point out is this R1B1, which is the most prevalent paternal group in Europe. Even though it's the most prevalent paternal group in Europe, it doesn't mean that autosomally Europeans are Asians, because this is the Asian Y chromosome. We have the Asian Y chromosome in Europe, very high percentage, but the amount of maternal Asian DNA is minimal, so that autosomally we are more Semitic than Asian. So this is what I wanted to point out. In Europe, of course. Okay, this is, for example, the makeup. As we can see. Okay, the H, the J, the T, the U, the V, the W. You have L, we know what L is. And we have N, we know what N is. N is the Asian. L is the Hamitic population, or Egyptus, or whoever you want to name L, the first L. Okay, then you have all this is Semitic. The H, the J, the T, the U, that's all Semitic. The X is even Semitic, but the X is like kind of significant, or well, not as much Asian, but it's yeah, it might be Asian, but it's Asian Semitic is what it is. It's not Asian, but it's Semitics in Asia. That's what the X is, which is not everywhere. So even if you have an R1, see, over half the population is R1 or R1b3, some form of R1. More than half of the population in northern Italy has the paternal um, paternal line of the Asian line. So the R1, this is the same as a Q. You have to understand that the R1 in Europe is the exact same thing as a Q, only it's the European branch of Q. So it's LMNOP Q R Q R. Q and R are the two different branches of the same branch. So the R is the European Asian branch or Japhetic branch of the Y chromosome in Europe. But it became so thinned out by the existing populations that it became not as significant in the autosomal DNA or in the basic genetic makeup of the Europeans. So again, here you can see it's a quarter of R, which is the same. It's a branch off from the Q. The R, a little bit more than a quarter, a third, in southern Italy, which is, the majority of the Europeans have the Asian paternal line R. Okay, this is the majority of Europeans have this R1b, some form of R1b or R1. So now here's a general chart. Remember the X is what I was saying is the Asian Semitic or the Semitics in Asia because it's under N, but it's not this line, not the H, HV, PJ, T, U, K. This part here, or these branches here of the MtDNA is the Semitic, or what do they call it? Middle Eastern. They call it Middle Eastern mitochondrial DNA. And this M is the Asian. So all these letters after the M before the N are the Asian mitochondrial or the Japhetic mitochondrial DNA, which is surprisingly not that much. Okay, notice the F here. This is still the Asian Semitics, or the Semitics in Asia, see this light green color here, which is a huge population in Asia, but it's Semitic. But it's not necessarily Jewish. The Jewish mitochondrial DNA is what has the HV, H, J, T, U, and K, as you can see in Europe here. And this H is the majority of Europe. The H and the HV, majority of Europe has the Semitic mitochondrial DNA. I mean the not only Semitic but Jewish mitochondrial DNA. Now this is the F is Semitic but not necessarily Jewish. I mean it could be, but it's the Asians. It's the MtDNA in Asia, the Semitic MtDNA in Asia, which of course there's X too. You know, sometimes you'll see an X in Europe, which was taken up there. But this T, the green, this J, this light color, or lighter blue color, or whatever it is, this U, this purple color, plus the H, you can see now it's the majority of Europe has this Semitic characteristic of the mitochondrial DNA, and the U and the K. So that's the majority makeup, and you can see just about anywhere in Europe will take, even in Northern Europe, in Scandinavian Finland, SA, what's SA? SA would be Sami, or Saami, or something like that. SA, it is majority, looks like the U and the V. And then we have the Asian blue and the light blue. Well, light blue is the H, which is Semitic. But it looks like there's an A too, which is still under N. It would be the A and the U, which is almost entirely Semitic, with the exception of this blue color here, which is Asian. So you can see that sliver of blue, which is Asian, which is this D here. Other than that, I got this light. See, they confused it so bad. They got this really, really light blue, which is Z, but it's not this color here. And you got this other color here, is like J or X or something. No, J. It's really confusing. They should have all the Asian one basic color, all the Hamites the other basic color. So this is what I was talking to Dan about, and that's the number of haplogroups that are not found in Africa. Of course, they're found up in these areas of Egypt, because these are areas of a lot of trade from Mesopotamian region, from the so-called Canaanites slash Phoenicians slash Jews that wandered away from Israel in the Mediterranean Sea. So you can see there's a mixture of all that. Of course, you can see the strong signal of the H here, which is strictly Semitic, and the T, and the U, and the K, and such, which is to be expected because you're talking the Middle East, you're talking the Mediterranean right here. And of course, the trade. At the time of King Solomon, they controlled this whole area here, even though Judah and Israel were about to be divided. I mean, they're about to be divided because they got stretched out so much. So they controlled all this area, and between the Israelites and the what they call the Phoenicians, which is a mixture of Israelites, Phoenicians, and Canaanites, they apparently went as far as the New World, bringing copper with their copper mines and their gold mines and stuff like that. In ships, huge, seaworthy ships, and they wouldn't let anybody pass the Straits of Gibraltar, apparently. And they wouldn't share their navigation technology with anyone else. So they controlled everything, all the oceans going as far as the Mediterranean. Now, this is what I'm saying. If scientists want to learn science, they have to first learn human history. Because as you can see here, look at the number of haplogroups in the Mesopotamian region as compared to Africa. Okay, here Ethiopia was a major hub as well. You can see the H there. You can see the K and the U. That is the Semitic signature in Africa. Is diverse in the haplogroup because of the Semitic trade with Israel. That's where the diversity comes from. Otherwise, it's just L, 1, 2, and 3. So you have L, 1, 2, and 3 in Africa. Of course, this is just the mitochondrial DNA, but the Y chromosome DNA shows the same thing. And notice the diversity, contrary to what Dan says. And Dan says, well, those are just letter designations. It doesn't mean the diversity. But when he's talking diversity, when Dan the man is talking diversity in Africa, he's using the genetic distance, the number of mutations and genetic distance, as far as what I can tell, and using that to conflate that with genetic diversity. Because the number of mutations, because there's more genetic distance in Africa, as you will see in the other charts, there's a lot of genetic diversity based on the number of mutations, which is not really genetic diversity. It's just a long line of mutations of the same branch. So if it's genetic mutations of the same branch, that's not genetic diversity. I mean, it becomes diverse, but not because of the rest of the world's population. So that's what Dan, the man, is conflating. Because if you're talking Africa, you're talking about the A, the B, the A's and B's. There is no diversity here in the A's and the B's. I mean, there is diversity, but the diversity is in the genetic mutations of the same branch. It's not genetic diversity from the rest of the world, as you can see here. And he's saying, well, these are just letter designations. Yeah, they are letter designations. Look how many. And the Semitic line is the most diverse as far as letter designations is concerned throughout the rest of the world, which goes all the way to South America. We have the B, which is still the Asian. Remember the F, the B, these N's, these numbers here, they're Semitic populations in Asia. So that's the Polynesians, the Micronesians, the Melanesians. And apparently, these people, I mean, this mitochondrial DNA made it to South America from the Pacific Ocean because it didn't go this way. You can see it didn't go this way. So it had to have made it to the Americas from the Pacific Ocean because you can see it didn't go up through here. At least it doesn't appear like it went up through there this way, which is interesting because the Y chromosome didn't do that, at least not significantly. Okay, so this dark color C is Asian. So we have this dark color here, this dark purple is Asian, but the lighter color, the lighter color is this either this is this A, probably this A, yeah. So this lighter color purple is still Semitic. So the majority of the American population is Semitic, with the exception of say right here, which has the D, which is Asian or Japhetic mitochondrial DNA in South America. So in South America, you have a good percentage of this Asian D mitochondrial DNA. And plus this darker color is also Asian. So the blue color and this dark purple color is Asian. So over half or over half the population, and here it's almost entirely, in the southern tip of South America is almost entirely Asian mitochondrial DNA. So this is one extreme. Europe is the other extreme where there's hardly a sliver of Japhetic mitochondrial DNA or Asian mitochondrial DNA. But notice there's a difference between the Semitic mitochondrial DNA in Asia and the Semitic mitochondrial DNA in Europe. So the HVs and the A's all the way to K is the European Semitic mitochondrial DNA, and the N's through F, which includes this lime green, is the Semitic population in Asia, which is considerable, which is substantial. I mean, it's a lot in the Asian population, but autosomally, there's probably more Asian because there's a lot of Y chromosome there. So autosomally is quite a bit Asian, even though some of this is like the Pacific Islands, which is sometimes considered Asians, maybe not so much other times. I mean, it is Asia, but it's Polynesia, Melanesia, Micronesia. So, but the huge amount of this A population over here in America is substantial. So the American Indians sometimes even look European. As opposed as opposed to the South American Indians, who sometimes look more Asian and Mexican. You see this Mexican, yep. Yeah, this purple, this A color here. Whoops, that's Asian. I mean, that's Semitic. So yeah, but there is of course, this red is Asian too. I mean, Semitic. So the red is Semitic. This purple is Semitic, but it's the Semitic population in Asia. So autosomally, having gone through Asia, they will look Asian anyway. So even if the mitochondrial DNA says Semitic, having gone through this Asian population, they're going to look Asian, especially if you have the Y chromosome that's Asian. So that's why in Mexico, for example, it was this Amerindians, ND, Nadenis. Okay, so an AM, Amerindians, Amerindis, 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 Amerindis. Oh, this is all AM, AM, AM. And ND is Nadenis. And ES is, I don't want to say Eskimo. Yeah, Eskimo. The AU, Alouettes. Aleutians, I guess. Aleutians. So this population having moved through Asia is going to be autosomally looking Asian, even though a lot of American Indians look sometimes European, sometimes. But of course, they might have a sliver of European DNA anyway. But this is mitochondrial. But there's the RY chromosome in here too, which is the other branch of the Q, the European branch of the Q that came over from the other side. But the main takeaway here is the amount of this Jewish or Israeli signal of mitochondrial DNA in Europe, because there is a Semitic population in Asia that may or may not be from Israel. I'm guessing that this B, this red color, and this A, the lighter color, is not. I'm guessing it's not Semitic, but it's that would have to be determined, because early on, this is a Semitic mitochondrial DNA early on that went into Asia. So this A here, which is this purple color all through the Americas, and the what else is there? Okay, the purple A and the red, yeah, the red. So the A and the B, the red and the purple all through Asia is Semitic mitochondrial DNA, but autosomally Asian in appearance, or somewhat Asian in appearance. And in South America, it's even more Asian in appearance sometimes. Okay. But in Europe, is a clear signal of the Jewish Israeli population, and we're going to see why. That is this yellow, light blue, this pink color, is is all the way looks all the way up here. This pink color, because that's not the L3. It's not the same pink color, or is it? I don't think it's the same color. No, it's not the same color. Okay, that and the green and this purple color, this shade of purple or violet or whatever is, and the K is the signal for the Israeli population. I'll just say Israelite population. That's the signal for the Israelite population right there. So autosomally, Europeans are largely Semitic because when Israel moved into Europe, they moved with their families, their kids, everything, Their whole family moved into Europe. As opposed to the R, when the R invaded Europe or moved into Europe, they were influenced autosomally. By the time they got over in this area here, they're basically Semitic, just with the RY chromosome, the Asian Y chromosome. So most of Europe has the Asian Y chromosome, the branch off from the Q, which is the R, but autosomally they're largely Semitic here from the tribes of Israel that moved up into Europe, because that's where they moved. When the 10 tribes were taken, they were taken up under here in this area, and then they moved up into this area, this area, this area. And you can see just by looking at this mitochondrial DNA where they all went, of course, in this area too as well, because they were all over PE, Persia, Iran. Iranians, Persians are largely Semitic or Jewish. They're they're largely Jewish population. So the Iranians are a Semitic population. They are basically a Jewish population in many regards as well. So we need to keep that in mind. When you when you want to go, take care of things in Iran, or these politicians want to take care of things in Iran, they are largely a Jewish population. So you have to make a note of that. Please make a note of that. Okay, and the KU, what's the KU? Kurds. See, there you have the Kurds, yeah. That's largely Semitic too, as well. Huge population of the K, large population of the H and the U, as well as the HV, which is H, and the K. So this one lighter yellow is the HV, the light blue is the H, and then you have the U and the K. So that's, and then the W. The W is is up here. It's still Semitic, which is interesting. They got three shades of yellow: the W, the HV, and the K, which is they got everything mixed up. But this is still all Semitic, and the TU is the Turkish. Turks. TU is Turks. Same thing. Same mix of mitochondrial DNA. So autosomally, this whole entire area here, autosomally, is Semitic in their mitochondrial DNA because when the 10 tribes of Israel moved into Europe, they moved in with their entire families. They didn't go marauding or invading or just taking their Y chromosome. They brought their whole families into Europe. And of course, they went all through this area in here. Okay, as an example of Chinese, you got the R1 here, which is European. It's European Asian in Asia. You can figure that out. So all this Q, all this O, N, O, and Q, remember the N is Asian? So the N, O, and Q, all this is Asian, Y chromosome, and a sliver of European Asian, which is probably the Q branch, the branch off from the Q that went into Europe and then came back to Asia, the Y chromosome. Then you have the C. We know who the C is. The C is Nimrod. That is African, if you will. The C and the D. There's a small sliver of D. And interestingly enough, Manchu tribe, there's a J2 signal of the Jewish population. Now this is Judah. J2 is a signal of the Judah, not Israel. And let me see. Oh, well, wait a minute. This is Y haplogroup. Yeah. What's the L? Oh, the ends. No, that's not. No, the N. The N is this is not mitochondrial. This is whatever. But L. Okay, the L, M, and N's. Okay. So the L begins the Asian population in the Y haplogroup. So it's J is the last of the Semitics, and then there's K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, O. This is mostly O here in Asian. Q, and then R is a branch off from the Q in Europe. But this is a huge signal of Kush. The C is the descendant of Kushite, the sub-Saharan African in Asia, which is from Nimrod, the CY chromosome, and the D, which is a sliver here. So that's the genetic makeup of Asia. Asia is mostly huge signal. Koreans. Okay, here's a Korean population. You have the LMNO, and that's it. Korean population. This Korean population is entirely Asian. For example, same thing here. Oh, not the same thing. Here's the C and the D. This Korean population, or this Gochang, wow, that's a big difference. See, there's no C, no D in this population. The GOG, no C, no D in this population. In this population, the Gochang, which seems Chinese. There's a huge C and D population, which is the Kushite Y chromosome. So this is a huge signal of the Kushite Y chromosome in this Gochang population in Asia. Which is the same as sub-Saharan African, except in Asia it's not sub-Saharan African. Okay, Japan looks like. Anyways. Okay, Korea, it is a big C population and D. And that's it. Then there's LMNOP R. And there's a sliver of R, which is the same, which is a branch off from the Q, but the rest is O, N's and O's. And this not quarter percent, 8% of D, which is it's not African, but it's descended from the Kushite, African Kushite. Right, this is the Jewish population here. Notice the Jewish population. This is basically the signal of the Jewish population. It doesn't say here, but it is. You have the J2, the J's R. This is a significant amount of R. I don't know why they have the I over here. But this I here, this is Israel. This is the tribes of Israel. I1. But it's supposed to be, should be I2 somewhere too, but I guess this I is I2. I mean, yeah, there's I and I1. But I think this is I2. And then there's the G. So the signal of the Jewish population is the G, sometimes the T, which I don't see the T here, and the J2. And then this is European, or the Asian European, this R1. And then this is somewhere in Europe, but you have the E3B, which is, there's a K. The E3B is a huge chunk of Hamitic Y chromosome in the Jewish population that they took to Europe, probably somewhere, I forget. It's not marked. Same thing here. You can see the percentage of R. G is Semitic. E is Hamitic. J1, we know what that is. These are the different populations. J2 and J1. J1 is Arabic. J2 is Judah. R1 is European. Then you have the I. The I is Israel, one of the 10 tribes of Israel. And then the L's and the N's and the LMNs. I don't know what the K is doing here, but the LMNs and the K, LMN and the K are Asian. So that's the Asian population right here. The L, N, and K is the Asian population percentage-wise of whatever this is. Ashkenazi. Okay, this is today's population. where things are located, where people are today. So you can see, remember this R1, which is most of Europe. Most of Europe is covered by the R1b, as well as Australia, as well as South America, which was colonized by the Europeans. The Europeans, remember, are I1, so it'd be the Spanish and the Portuguese. So most of this area here is in red is from Europe, of course, America and Canada. The Q population, where's the Q? Q over here is the Q population. This is indigenous. That's indigenous. So in these countries here, the majorities of native populations remains native in their Y chromosome. In Africa, you have the E1B1 or the A and the B and or the A and the B. One of the kings of or the pharaohs, one of the pharaohs was an E1B1 or something like that. And the other pharaoh had an RY chromosome, R1B1, which is European. King Tut had a European Y chromosome, which they didn't highly publicize. Okay, what's this dark color here? What is it? What is it? J1, A1. Oh, A1. Okay. So that'd be A1. This is the A1 population. Now these are looks like north and southern Sudan or Ethiopian stuff. But this is Ethiopia. This is North and South Sudan. Looks like is the A1 population, which would be descendants of Kush, probably because of the color of the skin. So autosomally, probably descendants of Kush, and of course the A1 is came after the E's. Remember, the original populations were almost identical. The E3s throughout this area here in northern Africa and Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa and Northern Africa is all E3. Okay, it says E1B1 here, but the major populations, this is like a general population, but the major original populations are E3 because they stem from the same place. And the A1 branched off of that as well as the E1s. Of course, in this area, they have the J1, which is Arabic. So all this green area here is Arabic, Semitic Arabic, and the J2, which is this lighter color blue here. Remember, I was saying Persia, Iran. J2 is all Jewish. So all this area here is predominantly J2. This lighter color blue, not this dark blue. This dark blue is I2, which is the same thing, which is Israel. So that's this strong signal of I2 here. That's pretty impressive because that's exactly the route that the Israelites took, which are I1 or I2. So this I2, that's very interesting, and the I1. You have the I1s and the I2s, which is the light color and the dark color. Because what happened was when the 10 tribes of Israel were taken captive from Israel, they were brought up in this area here. Underneath, in this area here, underneath the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. So this is where they were taken to. These are the lost tribes of Israel right here. You can see it in today's population. That is the I2 and the J2. Which is which? So this is the J. You got the darker one is the I2. Sometimes it's hard to tell, but this I2 here. So what happened was they were brought up in this area here. And Israel, they moved up through this mountain pass up into this area here. And they moved this way across this strait here into this area here. And remain here to this day. As you can see, you have the I1 and the I2 and the J2. So this J2 is Judah, specifically Judah. This I1 or I2, which is this, I can't tell the difference. No, this J1, this is J1. I mean J2. This is J1. But the J2 is Judah. This color blue here, whatever it is Judah. See, you have a sliver here too in Israel. But this color here, because I don't know if you can see that, but there's a sliver of J2 in Israel. And all this area here, this is all Israel, all Persia, all this area here, Greece. And this area here is Judah. J2 is Judah. Now the I1 and I2s are Israel. So to this day, the population that are living in this locations today are Israel. These are all Israel. Not to mention, autosomally, the rest of Europe is too. When you consider the mitochondria, because this is only looking at the Y chromosome. All this area of Persia and this area of Turkey, this is all the J2. Well, it's all Judah in the population. And the 10 tribes of Israel moved through this pass here, where there's a G. Look at the G. But they moved through this pass with a G. That's where they got the G from. Look at that. That's interesting. I was wondering where the G came from. But when they moved through this pass here, up in this area, this is the area of the steppes. The Yamnayas and the steppes and the Scythians or Scythians, whatever you want to call them. The Scythians or Scythians or Sacs, Isaacs, are sons of Jacob. And the steppes or the Yamnayas are the RY chromosome, or they're the Y chromosome that came from Asia through here. The RY chromosome is what came through Asia. Now here they have it as O, LMNO, Where's Q? This is Q. So this is this Q, the American branch. This is Q. This is Q. No, that's not Q. This is what is that? This color scheme is hard to tell. I guess it's Q, which is the Asian Y chromosome. Of course, they have the ends too. Where's the ends? No ends. Purple is the. Oh, no, that's not right. Purple. There's the end. Yeah. Yeah, this color end. Yeah, they have the ends up in here too. But this Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are, well, autosomally they are Semitic. So all the Europeans that don't look Asians are heavily Semitic in their mitochondrial DNA, and they have the male Y chromosome of Asians, but autosomally they're mostly Semitic, or a good percentage Semitic. So that's why. And you have the O. And what's China? China is O3. Oh, yeah, going to make a difference between O and O3. Okay. So this is what you're talking about with genetic diversity here. When Dan the Man's talking about genetic diversity, what he means is greater number of mutations. Or he seems to be conflating the greater number of mutations here in this line as with genetic diversity. So that's his genetic diversity right there. It's the diversity is within the line, is within the branch. That's where the diversity is the number of mutations, the difference between the people in their mutations in their own branch, which has nothing. Then he says, "Oh, these are just letter designations." Yeah, they're letter designations, all right. It's a lot of designations that have nothing to do with this branch. So they fail to explain that. I mean, this is their diversity right here, is in the number of mutation. That's his diversity. That's what he calls diversity, is the number of mutations in this line, in this branch. Nothing to do with the rest of the world, all these other haplogroups. All these other haplogroups are not found in Africa. As a matter of fact, the only ones found in Africa are the E, the A, and the B, and the E. The C and the D aren't even in Africa. You know, to speak of. And then the FGH, this is Semitic, and of course the I and the J. Remember the J1 and J2? The Arabic population and the Judah population right here. And the I is a branch off from the same tree as the J. J1, J2, and the I. And the I, there's not much here, but this I is found all through Europe. So it's not highly represented right here in this chart. And of course, this is the Asian, the O's and the N's and the M and the Q's. Remember, I said the Q and the R are different branches of the same tree. This is European and this is Asian. It's the same tree. They belong to the same tree. The Q's and the R's. Is that one went one way, the Q's went one way, and the R's went the other way. These R's went into Europe, and from Europe they went all the way to America too. Probably by way of Vikings or something. But anyway, it's the same. It's branches from the same tree. So it's Asian. So everybody in Europe that has an RY chromosome has an Asian Y chromosome, but they're not autosomally, they're not Asian. Their name, their paternal line is Asian, but they're not Asian autosomally as much. Of course they are Asian. Obviously they wouldn't exist without the Asian influence. In Europe, all Europeans, myself included, we do have Asian autosomal DNA, and it shows up in our bodily structure, our bone structure, and everything. But you might not necessarily notice it just in a general glance, unless you're trained, unless you know what you're looking for. Europeans are basically Semitic with a slight Asian influence. But the IY chromosome, the JY chromosome that we were looking at all throughout this area here, that's all Jewish. It's all Israel. To this day, majority of the population, you can see even in Israel itself, same color. And of course, IY chromosomes all throughout in this area as well as this area too. The Celts and the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons all have IY chromosome to a large extent. So this is the other one. There's your genetic diversity right there. Number of mutations. Dan's genetic diversity. Look at the rest of the world. They said those are just letter designations. No, they're different trees, Dan. It's not just a letter designation. They're different trees. This is a different tree. This is one tree. This is another tree. This is another tree. And as you can see, this HVR thing here, this bit here, this is the it's the Jewish mitochondrial DNA signature. And these others are the other ones, other mitochondrials. Whereas anyways, it's hard to tell. And this is the Asian mitochondrial DNA. C, D, G, and M is the Asian mitochondrial DNA. Notice how clearly the trees are. Here's Dan's genetic diversity over here. That's what he calls diversity. The L0000 or the A000000. So that's his genetic diversity. Is the number of mutations. It's just that line has more mutations than any other line. You can see this is genetic diversity It's a genetic distance. That means there's more mutations in this line here than there is in this line here. That's his that's what he calls genetic diversity. And I'm saying, well, what about the pie charts that show all these other haplogroup designations? He says, oh, those are only letter designations. No, they're not, Dan. They're other trees. You can see this is a whole entire tree, completely unattached from this branch of this tree here. Here's a whole nother entire Asian tree, Asian mitochondrial DNA, completely unattached from Dan's genetic diversity over here. That's what he calls genetic diversity right there, the number of mutations. They have more mutations here, so that's his genetic diversity, apparently, because it has nothing to do with this diversity here. This diversity here are two other trees, completely different, unattached from this tree here. And don't give me this this rooted nonsense because they're all rooted in the same, because when you get down to here, this node, and this node here is virtually identical mitochondrial DNA. That's what you have to understand. It's rooted in the identical mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosome DNA because the progenitors have nearly identical, and yet it's not. There's three sisters. These are three sisters here, or not. We don't even know if they're sisters, but the three women from before the flood that clearly, according to this, have their own mitochondrial DNA. But even so, they are more similar to each other than we are to each other because we have branched out since then. But at the time, they had almost identical mitochondrial DNA, especially when you're talking about the three sons of Noah in the Y chromosome DNA. They did have identical DNA. Look how close it is. They did have identical Y chromosomes. Because you can't tell me that the three sons of Noah didn't have these exact same Y chromosome DNA with maybe one mutation between them or whatever. But it's nearly identical because I took a Y chromosome test and I know that my Y chromosome is nearly identical to cousins of mine that I only connect to 300 years ago. And I have like 5 differences in the number of copies in 111 different locations. Only 5 differences in the number of copies of the same information. So that identifies me as being from the same ancestor 300 years ago. So look how close these are. These are close like this because they had identical DNA. They had identical Y chromosomes, the three sons of Noah. But it's their offspring that branched out and had the variations. So if you want to talk about genetic diversity, then here's your genetic diversity right here. This is your genetic diversity, not the number of mutations. Silly. See, they got to twist stuff to push their worldview. Okay, here's another chart which shows this J2. Remember this area here underneath the Caspian Sea and the Baltic Sea? This is all Asia and Turkey and Greece and Italy, of course. And see, this is the area of the so-called Phoenicians or Canaanites or Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were, I guess, known as the Sea Peoples, but they're a mixture of Canaanites, Phoenicians, and obviously Israel, the Jewish people, because they had control of this entire Mediterranean Sea and beyond. They wouldn't let anybody pass the Straits of Gibraltar at one time or back in the day. Again, you can see the J1, Middle Eastern Semitic. This is the Arabic population, the J1. The J2 is clear the Jewish population. So, I mean, if you have any questions about what the Bible is saying, right in your face right here are the two branches of Abraham's descendants. You don't think Abraham existed, but you can see his Y chromosome right here. This is Judah. These are the Arabic. This is the Arabic population. This is Judah, Judaic population. And of course, the Arabic population is by itself, even though Abraham had 7 other sons besides Isaac. But remember that those 7 other sons had identical DNA. As a matter of fact, the 7 other sons had identical DNA with Isaac, because you're talking about the Y chromosome. So their Y chromosome is identical. The 7 sons of Abraham that were brothers to Isaac had identical DNA. That's why they're both J. But then, of course, Isaac is the progenitor of Judah, which is distinct from the descendants of the 7 other sons, because Judah went his way and the 7 other sons went their way with their identical DNA. So they branch off one way. The J2 branches off the other way. The I2 as well. The I2 and the J2 are on the same tree, branches of the same tree, as we can see here. The I and the J, and I don't know if this is J1, J2, I don't know what that is. But the I and the J are on the same tree. And this is me right here, the I. So if you want to see exactly what I am, I'll show you, as I've already showed before. Notice you have the J2, the I2, and then you have the I1. So from the J2 branched the I2, which branched the I1. See I2A, and you can see these lines up here, the I1. Okay, there's I2 here. Just checking. And I1. See this I1 M253? That's me. That's my Y chromosome. I1 M253, exactly. And what happened is that these were the Vikings and the Anglo-Saxons, probably the Anglo-Saxons that went into Scotland here. And my surname originated from Scotland, right there. So that's how I got the I1 M253, which is all the way from Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. So I'm a direct male descendant of Jacob. Okay, and then you have the H is the Gypsy or the Romanis, and the G's. Yeah, this is the G population here when they went through the pass. See this Caucasian stuff, Russian. They're known as the Scythians or the Scyths, and there's a whole study of the Scythians, and the Scythians are the 10 tribes of Israel that went through this pass up over in this area. They're called the Scythians or Scythians or Sacs or Isaaks or Anglo-Sax, Saxons, Isaac's sons, you know, that invaded or that went into Britain. And that's who I am. Anyway, so here we got the Y haplogroups in the world. So as you can see, we have the Qs on one side. There's the Q on this side. And we have the R's, which is the yellow and the red. So the yellow and the reds is the R's that went into this side. Okay, you also have the I's and the J's. The I's and the J's. Again, the J's over here. And the K's. J's and the K's. I don't know. The K's might be Jewish too. For that matter. K. Well, the K is all the way in Asia, so it could be Asian because it's the beginning of the Asians. The K. But anyways, they have the I's and the J's. So up here, the I's, this pink color, the I's. Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and the Celtic region, the Germanic, basically Germanic. GMs is Germanic. Germany. GM is Germany. So this Germanic population is, well, today has the Asian Y chromosome signature all over Europe. Again, Europe is covered with the Asian Y chromosome, but autosomally, as we saw in this other chart, they're mostly Semitic, as in the MtDNA chart. So this is what we have: the Yamnaya culture. They had both the R and the IY chromosome apparently, and it's showing how they moved into Europe. So this is the Yamnaya culture, and quickly you'll see the Scythian culture after this. This is the RY chromosome. The Scythian culture is the I, right here, Scythians. See, all this, Germanic, Celtic, Celtic, Balkan, that was all the IY chromosome. That was all the lost tribes of Israel. Whoops. So, where's the MtDNA? There it is. Remember, the RY chromosome is completely Asian in Europe, but the autosomal maternal, because when Israel went up into Europe, they went with their whole family. So autosomally, Europeans are basically Israelites by way of their mitochondrial DNA, because it wasn't the moms and kids that invaded Europe. It was the male line that went into Europe. It spread into Europe. It spread all over Europe. If I can move this over. And compare it to the other one. Oops. Almost blacked it out. Okay. Okay, so let me go here. So it's this one. Y haplogroups covering Europe. And look at Dan's genetic diversity here. Yeah, some genetic diversity. So I can say to Dr. Dan, he has no clue what he's talking about. because this is not genetic diversity. This diversity here in Eastern Africa and Northern Africa is from Mesopotamia. Of course, this here is a RY chromosome, by the way. It's the R Y chromosome in Africa. So this Y chromosome that spread into Europe also actually went into Africa, as you can see, R1, RX1, whatever. But it is an RY chromosome in Africa that also, when they went into Europe, they also went into Africa for some reason. So that's, DNA doesn't lie. It is what it is. And the O's. So the African DNA or the Hamitic DNA is A, B, C, D. And of course, the C and the D are not found in Africa. And the E's. So that's Dan's genetic diversity right there. It's the number of mutations in that branch, in that line. And here is the real genetic diversity of all the other haplogroups, of all the other people that Dan says are just letters. Yeah, these are just letters, right? It's the rest of the world originated from here and went into these areas, extreme areas, from this area, not this area here. There is no genetic diversity here. The number of mutations in a single line is not genetic diversity. I mean, it is if you want it to be, but it's not the genetic diversity of the different haplogroups or mitochondrial DNA or autosomal DNA. You're just making up stories trying to fit your belief. And you can see it right here. DNA doesn't lie. Doesn't lie. Look at here. Of course, these L1, 2, and 3s are not found anywhere else in the world in any great numbers. Your genetic diversity is in Turkey, this area here. Turkey, Uzbekistan, Persia. Look at the genetic diversity in Persia. That's genetic diversity, Dan. And these are not just letter designation. That's autosomal. That's everything. And the only genetic diversity you have in the L's is the number of mutations in that branch, in that line. And all your real genetic diversity is from Mesopotamia, which is the cradle of civilization where we came from. If you want to be a scientist, Dan, you have to learn history first so you can be a real scientist, Dan, okay? Put that on record. Because DNA doesn't lie. You can see it as these are the sons of Abraham. 7 sons, because they had identical DNA. 7 sons of Abraham that were not Isaac, and all the descendants of Isaac and Jacob, which are the 10 tribes of Israel that moved up all in this area here, went all the way. See this I1M253, it says Germanic. It says Germanic because it's from this area of the Germanic tribes. You've heard of Germanic tribes, right? They're Israelite tribes, which also, of course, went into this area here, but which is also is covered by the Asian Y chromosome. So the Asian Y chromosome kind of obscures the real true identity of Europeans, because the Europeans are not Asian, even though they have an Asian Y chromosome. Autosomally, they're not as Asian as Asians. They're more Semitic than they are Asian. They're more Jewish and Israelite than they are Asian or Japhetic. Because remember Japheth lived in this area originally. He was north of it. This is Mesopotamia here. There was Ham went this way. Nimrod had his kingdom in the land of Shinar, which is Mesopotamia, right here. Is right here. That's where Abraham is from. But Nimrod, who was allegedly killed by Esau, that would be Jacob's brother, Jacob and Esau. So Esau was a hunter too, just like Nimrod was a hunter, and they were like rivals or something. And Esau allegedly killed Nimrod, who was the king of Shinar, king of Mesopotamia, and also coincidentally, was the son of Cush. Which explains the CY chromosome going through Asia, all through. You can see Mongolia and the rest of the world really here. CY chromosome all over the rest of the world. These are all descendants of Nimrod. C2, C4. There's even a C5 somewhere. C3 goes all the way into the Nadenis. Oh, the Nadenis are C3. Okay. And all the way to the Quichuas, the Waoranis, and the Wayus all have the C3Y chromosome from Nimrod. And the Waoranis were like the most violent tribe in the world. They had a homicide rate among themselves of 60%. Not to mention that they killed 5 missionaries. They would kill outsiders just as soon as they would their own people, or even sooner. But the gospel was brought to them. The word of God was brought to them, and some of them believed, and they themselves became missionaries to the world. Believe it or not. That's the Stephen Curtis Chapman. Anyway, or one of them, but of course, who represented the Waorani people throughout the Europe, all the way to India, as a matter of fact, all over the world, in developing areas with dentistry and everything, a whole bunch of stuff. And you have people like Dapper Diner want to check my sources. Well, I studied the Waorani people. The only thing I could find. Anyway, I grew up in South America, okay? When I grew up right here in South America, and the stories they were telling me was like about 5 years earlier of the 5 missionaries that were killed by the Waorani people. And when I grew up right here, that's the story, that's the book they read to me about those 5 missionaries that were killed by the Waorani people, the Auca Indians. The Auca, they were called Auca because that means savage in the local language there. The Auca, they just call them savages. They were some oil company was going to wipe them out until this missionary group decided, yeah, before the oil company goes in and wipes them out, they're going to reach them with the gospel. So they brought the word of God, and they were subsequently killed, 5 of them. And there's a whole big story, if you want to check my sources, of how the wives and children went into the tribes, the same tribe that killed the 5 missionaries. One of the people that killed the 5 missionaries became the surrogate father to the son of the missionary that he killed. So that's that. And when I was living in Germany, here somewhere, where's Germany? Germany's here somewhere. I went up into England and visited some missionaries who were also English missionaries to Brazil, because when I grew up here in Brazil on the Amazon River, I went to a private school, and we had people from England, people from Canada, people from America. So I was basically raised internationally by Canadians, English, and Americans, because I'm from America. I'm from here, and here, and here, and here, are here. So, so I visited people in England that I knew in Brazil when I was in Germany. So now that I made a mess of this video here, just go through here. So these are Scythians. That's the reach of the tribes of the sons of Israel, right there. Okay, that's the extent to which the 10 tribes of Israel spread into Europe by way of the Scythians and the Celts and the Germanic tribes, and you can see the Y chromosome to this day from Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel that were moved up in this area here underneath the Black Sea, and they went through the mountain pass, and they became Scythians, all the way down here, all the way here, all the way through here, all over here. And they brought their wives and kids with them. That's why Europe is autosomally Semitic. And the RY chromosome is in name only, basically. It's an Asian name only. Because by the time the Q branch came from all the way over through here, he's mixing autosomally all the way through. So by the time he reaches here, he's autosomally Semitic, majority Semitic. So that's my point that I'm making of my discovery anyway. So now that I made a mess of things, I mean this video, let me go back and check on how I'm doing. I got Remy, I got Ken. Have you done 23andMe ancestry? I did the autosomal test. It was ancestry.com, and then I did the Y chromosome test. Hello, Remy. Wow, I don't have anybody here. I told you that I felt like I'm talking to the air, to thin air, to myself. So when Dapper Dino responded to my video, that was pretty good, because sometimes I just feel like I'm talking to myself or talking into thin air. But it is what it is, and God bless you. I might as well just cut it off here before I make a complete mess of this. So it's probably not interesting to some, but it's interesting to me because it's science. The science of biology and DNA, mitochondrial, Y chromosome, autosomal DNA, biology, and it contradicts the out of Africa belief. There's one thing people need to understand, including Dan and Dapper Dino and Dapper Dino, Dapper Dino, Dapper Dano and Dapper Dino. No, we kid around with Dan, but he's some kind of biologist, doctor, studied. He has letters behind his name. So yeah, Dr. Dan, the guy that's trying to tell me that Africans are diverse. Yeah, they're diverse, all right, and their number of mutations they have in their line going all the way through. They have more mutations than anybody else. That's their diversity. And the haplogroups are just letter. That's the rest of the world, Dan. So just take that to the bank or whatever. Make a note of it. How about that? So, got everything. Don't forget to draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Seek the truth, and you will find it. You seek for it with all your heart.